That guy needs some help. After a very delicious fried chicken dinner prepared by the Swedish Lutheran ladies at a missionary social conference held in a small church, the conversation moved from the dinners to other small talk. The speaker for the conference asked the pastor's wife, "How many children do you have?" In the noise of the time there and the people there, the pastor's wife thought he said, "How many chickens do you have?" A normal question because most families in the community had chickens in their backyard. She replied, "I really don't know. My husband takes care of them. They stay pinned up in the backyard, and he sees to it that the mill scraps get out to them. Every now and then one gets out, but that doesn't happen very often." That guy had to be a little bit concerned about.
Oh, God. Is that right?
All right, so we're entering week 4 of our series that we've titled The Old Testament Experience. We're walking through the Old Testament, looking at different events and people and how they showed faith in God. And a lot of these stories are ones that we heard as kids in Sunday school, Vacation Bible School. But our goal is to look at these stories from a different viewpoint. Look at them in get a deeper understanding of these stories. So now we're going to look at Elijah and God's sovereignty. Lots of people try to say that nothing in the Bible is comical. But my guess is they've never read or heard this story that we're going to be looking at tonight. So before we dig into the text, we need to look at who Elijah was. Anybody have any idea who Elijah was?
The fire experience?
He was a firefighter.
Yeah.
His name means "the Lord is my God." Now there are 3 or 4 men in the Old Testament with this name, but the other 2 or 3 are just like, this guy was the father of this, or Elijah was the father of him, or Elijah was a brother or son. So the one we're looking at tonight was an influential prophet who lived during the 9th century BC. His activities emphasized the unconditional loyalty to God required of the nation of Israel. He had an outdoor type personality. He appeared in the role of God's instrument of judgment upon the wayward Israel because of the nation's widespread idolatry. So this is a theme that we've seen so far from Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego struggling with idolatry. You could say that David struggled with the idolatry. Even Jacob, the people that he was leading, they struggled with idolatry. That's why they wandered around the wilderness for 40 years. This is the idea that's going to shape our story tonight. So God caused a famine in Samaria because King Ahab and Queen Jezebel were the cause of it, and they lived there. We're going to look at chapter 18, verses 17 through 40. But the first 16 verses of 1 Kings chapter 18, Elijah sends Obadiah. Pretty much he spends 16 verses telling Obadiah to tell Ahab that he's coming, that he's going to be coming to Israel. So turn your Bible to 1 Kings 18, 17 through 40. First Kings 18.
17 through 40, you said?
Mm-hmm. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you troubler of Israel?" "I have not made trouble for Israel," Elijah replied, "but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the bells. Okay, so these 2 verses, Ahab holds Elijah accountable for this famine that's happened and the drought that's happening, and even charges him with a crime against the state that was worthy of death, because he saw that Elijah was the one that had caused this drought. But the real source of Israel's trouble was Ahab, and his disregard of the Mosaic covenant and his preference for idolatry. Verse 19, "Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of the other guy, who ate at Jezebel's table." So Ahab sent word throughout all of Israel and assembled the prophets on the mount. Okay, so why did he pick this mount? It was a high ridge next to the Mediterranean Sea, which means due to the rain that would be coming off of that, the drought was not as apparent there. It was more of a fertile land, and it stood between Israel and Parousia geographically. So it was neutral ground between Yahweh's land and Baal's land. And storms with lightning and thunder were common, and the Baal worshippers viewed them as manifestations of their deity, which is something to remember with how they're with what's going to happen later. So in many people's minds, Baal had the advantage in this contest. So Elijah, who was just a prophet, ordered King Ahab around, and surprisingly, King Ahab obeyed. Probably hundreds, if not thousands, of people gathered since Elijah summoned all of Israel to the mount. So we're now looking at verse 21. Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two options? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." But the people said nothing. Then Elijah said to them, I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood fire, but not set fire to it. Put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God. Then all the people said, what you say is good. All right, so the word waver here is Hebrew for dance, and we'll see it a little bit later in this. And they were dancing between 2 options. Now, they weren't saying that God was less, or that they didn't want to go against God, or they were trying to go against God. What they were seeing it as, rather, is they wanted to serve both gods. Elijah is telling them that they have to pick between either God or Baal, and they can't serve both. Same thing we see in other parts of the Bible. Jesus' teaching on money is you can't serve both God and money. So Elijah sought to turn Israel from Baal worshippers back to Yahweh. He realized that the odds were 450 against 1. Elijah fell alone. His victory would require a supernatural act of God. He needed some sort of physical action to turn the people back to worshiping God. So he has to get 2 bulls or oxen, and the Baal prophets will choose one, and he'll take the other. And they were each to prepare their bull to be offered as a sacrifice to their God. So a normal activity, something they were used to doing, is sacrificing animals. But instead of setting it on fire, they were just supposed to put it on the wood, and then he'd give them further instructions. And he says that we'll each call on our God, and whoever answers by fire, he is God. So pretty much, you call on your God, I'll call on my God, and winner take all. Both the Lord and Baal were said to ride the thunderstorms as their divine chariots. With thunder was their voice, lightning was their weapon. So Elijah's challenge is direct. It's something that they understood, that being on this mound where thunderstorms happen, that Baal would probably have the advantage, because that's what they believed is how their God responded to them and talked to them. So picking up in verse 25. Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, as there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire. So they took the bull given them and prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. Baal answer us, they shouted, but there was no response. No one answered, and they danced around the altar that they had made. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. Shout louder, he said. Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened. So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response, no answer, no one paid attention. So he tells them, you have the more. You have 400, there's one of me, you go first. And so they start praying all morning, and nothing, not even a whisper of the wind, not even the wind was blowing. And they began to be desperate and jumped and stomped around the altar. The word dance that was used here was not a rain-making dance, but a wild dance in worship of Baal. It's the same Hebrew word that we saw of waver. So Elijah did something that probably surprised all the people there and started mocking Baal. About noon, Elijah started making fun of these guys. He tells them to call a little louder. Maybe your God is busy off meditating or on vacation. Elijah refuses to acknowledge that Baal was a god at all. And surprisingly, just like King Ahab, they actually listened to him. And they started praying louder. They cut themselves. They used every trick in the book and still nothing. Every form that they had heard of how to worship Baal and caused the storm to happen, and it wasn't happening. For 6 hours, the priests of Baal ranted and raved, and nothing happened. So we pick it back up in verse 30 and see how Elisha does. Then Elisha said to all the people, "Come here to me." They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, "Your name should be Israel." With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 pounds of seeds. 2 shells of seeds are 24 pounds. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to him, "Fill 4 large jugs with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood." "Do it again," he said, and they did it again. "Do it a 3rd time," he ordered, and they did it the 3rd time. The water ran down and around the altar and filled the trench. So finally Elijah says, "Enough is enough. It's my turn now." So Yahweh's altar at the site had fallen into despair. So there had been an altar for Baal and an altar for Yahweh. But due to the fact that so many people were worshiping Baal now, this altar hadn't been used. And so it had come to despair. So Elijah takes the time to rebuild it as the Mosaic covenant said to, with 12 uncut stones, symbolic of Israel's 12 tribes. He dug a wide trench around the altar. So the 12 pitchers of water, which would be symbolic of the 12 tribes, is also of water, likely represented Israel's probably as God's instrument of refreshment to the world. So they drenched the whole altar with water. Why do you think they drenched the whole altar with water?
Purified?
To keep the fire from starting.
Okay, well, we'll find out. So it ran all the way down the altar and filled the trench. This was all part of the preparation for sacrificing to God. Verse 36, at the time of the sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you are Lord, our God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." So Elijah prayed a simple prayer for God's glory at 3 p.m. And it's the time of Israel's sacrifice to illustrate its daily commitment to Yahweh. He prayed that the Lord would reveal himself as Israel's God. The heart of the people would need turning back to God for evidence of that as well. So he needed something physical, something that he could demonstrate to help them see. They could hear all these teachings about trying to turn back to God, but to be able to physically see something and physically see what God can do. Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trenches. When all the people saw this, they fell and cried, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." Then Elijah commanded them, "Seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let anyone get away." They seized them, and Elijah had them brought down to the valley and slaughtered there. So Elijah had said his prayer, and immediately fire fell down and burned up the ox, the wood, and the water in the trenches, even the dirt. The people saw, and they turned back to God. They demonstrated their repentance with obedience to the Mosaic law and God's prophets by slaying the false prophets as the law had said. The same thing that we saw with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego when the soldiers died, putting them into the furnace, that God will take care of the people that worship Him. So the rest of this chapter talks about how the drought ended, all because they turned back to God. So two major themes that I see in this story are Elijah's faithfulness and courage and God's sovereignty. First, let's look at Elijah's faith and courage. Like I've said before, this is going to be a major theme of our study, and a major theme of a lot of the people in the Old Testament. Elijah was supposed to be a prophet in Israel, but the people had turned away from God, so his job became really difficult. But he never gave up on God or on the people of Israel, even when it was 40 prophets for Baal and one for him. He showed courage to stand up to Baal's prophets and help lead the people back to God. He could have at any time told God, there is no way that I can save these people. He could have done like Jonah did and ran away. But instead, he fought to win them back with God's help. Does anyone know what it means? Does anyone know what God's sovereignty means? What it means that God is sovereign? It's the unlimited power of God who has sovereign control over the affairs of nature and history. So we're going to look at 4 things that deal with God's sovereignty. First, it involves his powerful control of all things. So things sometimes seem out of control, yet the Bible teaches he is powerfully in control of everything. Second, God's power is not limited in any way, shape, or form. Nothing can stop him, even including buckets of water. Like you said, Bo, it shouldn't have started because they covered it in water and it overflowed into the trenches. So nothing can stop God, not even these buckets of water. God is doing it because he wants to do it. He is doing it all of it for his own pleasure, which means that everything is for a purpose. God has a purpose for everything that he does. 4, God is outside of time. This can help us understand the sovereignty of God a little bit. First, he doesn't just see the present. He knows everything that has ever happened. He sees everything that's happening right now. And he also knows everything that will ever happen. And second, that's why he hardened Pharaoh's heart to let the people go. And that's why he loved Jacob more than Esau, even before they were born. Because he knew that what the future held, and that his name would be glorified for his purpose. So God's understanding is so far beyond our own, and he does things sometimes that we simply can't understand. But he's always in control. He is always on our side. He is always sovereign. And we know that if we love him, he works all things out together for good, even when it doesn't appear that way at first. So a few Bible verses highlight these points. First one is 1 Chronicles 28, 11 and 12. Yours, Lord, is the greatness, and the power, and the glory, and the majesty, and the splendor. For everything in heaven and earth is yours. Yours, Lord, is the kingdom. You are exalted as head over all. Wealth and honor came from you. You are the ruler of all things. In your hands are strength and power to exalt and give strength to all. Psalms 15:3 says, our God is in heaven. He does whatever pleases him. Psalms 103:19 says, the Lord has established his throne in heaven, and his kingdom rules over all. Proverbs 21:1 says, in the Lord's hand, the king's heart is a stream of water that he channels through all who please him. In Job 42:2, I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be dulled. So the worshippers of Baal could not have done more for God to send fire. They did everything that they thought and everything that they were taught to do, they did. All their efforts could not affect the outcome. Sovereign God was reigning and was in control. Elijah could not have done more to hinder his sacrifice from getting the fire. In fact, that was what he was showing the Baal worshippers, that our God is so much mighty and sovereign than we could ever imagine. Even when we do everything to invite him to work in our lives, or everything to hinder him from working in our lives, it is ultimately up to him. He has mercy on whom he wants to have mercy. He saves those he wants to save. He shows wrath on whom he chooses to show wrath. Who are you to stop him when he is moving? It's like an ant trying to stop a semi-truck going 80 miles per hour. It's just not going to work. It's going to end up messy. Isn't that what our salvation is all about? It's only because of Christ. It's not 1 ounce of us, not one single ounce of us. We are sinners, separated from God, crushed, thrown aside, empty and useless before God, stepped in with His sovereign purpose and chose to do something. He didn't have to, but He did. When we turn to idols, that offers us no power. We worship all sorts of false gods, maybe even without realizing the control that they have on us. And all the while, God is saying, how long will you waver? How long will you waver between whatever your idol may be, or whatever you're focusing before God? How long are you going to waver between that and God? He's saying, if I am your God, serve me. Stop giving control to everything else. Don't be lukewarm. God's sovereignty. God is sovereign. He alone is powerfully in control of all things, including your life, and He alone is worthy of our complete devotion and worship. So maybe for the first time tonight, you're coming to this realization that you bring nothing to the table, that you come empty-handed before God, and yet He chose to love you. He chose to save you from that. You want to let God know that you want to serve Him for the rest of your life. I saw this quote on a bench and post, and it said, the thing that makes you angry controls you. So what is controlling you? What is your idol that you're putting before God? Turn it over to God and let Him take control of that anger. God is in control of every situation.